Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome once again to the Meat and Potato Show, Conservative Talk in Ossip Rock. I am your host, Christopher Mader, and joining me here at Brad Wyatt's wonderful building here at 18 Grafton Street, Worcester, Massachusetts, here at the Liberty Clubhouse, is Vincent Cogliano Jr. And Vincent is running for U.S. Congress out of the 9th District. Do I have that right? The 9th District, right? Hampton County, some of those areas in Massachusetts, correct?
Well, Plymouth County, Barnstable County, a little bit of Bristol County.
Okay, excellent, excellent. So welcome to the show, sir. Great to have you here. Thanks for driving out here. And where were you driving out from?
Well, my office, I left my office, and my office is in Norwell, Mass. Right. But I live in Pembroke.
Okay.
And grew up in Pembroke. We have a 12-acre farm in Pembroke.
Excellent. Tell us about yourself. Tell us about Vincent and why are you running?
Well, I'm a businessman. Besides having the family farm, we grow Christmas trees on the farm. But I'm a businessman. Over the years, I've started 4 businesses.
Sure.
The one I manage now, we started 10 years ago. And 3 years ago, we had 54 employees and we were growing. Now we have fewer than 30. And I'm not happy with either party in Washington, D.C. I don't think either party is doing anything to help small business.
Right.
You don't start a business to be laying people off. It's tough to do. And I tell people, in the 80s and the 90s, there were always times where you had to lay people off for one reason or another.
Sure.
But the economy was good. Jobs were easy to find. You could rationalize and at least say to yourself, well, if they do a good resume and make a good interview, they're going to find another job.
Every time that I'm 50 years old, I've lost jobs, either just lost them or gotten fired. A week or two later, sure, got another job.
Right.
Go ahead.
We had to lay off 3 people this past December in order to get our bank line of credit refinanced to stay in business.
Really?
Yeah. And those people, only one of them has found a job. So, we have millions of people who want to work in America who can't find jobs. And I don't hear anybody talking in their behalf. I hear everyone talking about the people who aren't working and don't want to work. What about the millions of people who do want to work?
Certainly.
And Republicans and Democrats are doing nothing that I can see to help them to get back to work again. I want to go to Washington to find out why.
Interesting. Now, I just read an interesting piece following up on that there's something like 250 bills that the Republican-controlled House has sent to Senate. Harry Reid, of course, being the leader of the Senate there, has pretty much put the kibosh on a lot, and some of those are a lot of jobs bills. So, if and when you get there, you might want to knock on Harry Reid's door and say, what are these 250 bills? Probably about 150 of them, because there were interviews with Bader, and he says, we're sending stuff all the time, and they're hearing nothing from the Senate.
I've heard the same thing.
Right.
I'd like to see what they are. Are they job training programs? Training for what? There's no jobs. Why are you training people
Sure.
for no jobs? Are they bills that would get rid of Obamacare, cut rules and regulations, get rid of Dodd-Frank, which is even probably worse than Obamacare?
Yeah, right.
For business? Is it tax reform? Because I don't think John Boehner is doing much in the way of tax reform. We need a flat tax or a fair tax in America. We need corporate tax reform. We need a lower flat rate for corporations as well.
How is it for you with your farm as far as corporation tax? Are you incorporated on your farm? But what is it like for you guys in taxes?
Well, we're just a small farm. We do it really to keep the property and farm to, to make it beneficial to have that land nowadays, because otherwise you're killed by taxes.
Certainly.
So we've got about 2,000 Christmas trees. We've done this for 30 years. People come in and either they cut their own tree or we cut it for them, and it's fun.
Right.
We don't make a whole lot of money, but we do file as a farm, which means we can write off all the expenses of the farm. So that helps. And we get a tax break on our property taxes, which is a big help as well. So, but we're not making, if we make, $1,000 a year on the farm.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Really? So you obviously you do another job.
It's a hobby.
Again, tell us more about yourself and.
Again, the company I run now is an auto finance company.
Okay.
And we finance cars in about 15 states. And we're trying to grow, but it's been tough. We used to fund between 400 and 500 loans a month. Now we're down to about 100.
Wow.
You know, people are not buying as many cars, and frankly, what a lot of people don't know is that banks today, bigger banks, are doing the same thing in cars that they did for housing. They're financing people who shouldn't be financed.
Certainly.
27% of all loans last year in auto finance were to customers who probably have very bad credit. So they're propping up the car companies by doing that. But now, all of a sudden, a lot of those cars are being repossessed because, just like with the housing crisis, they gave loans to people who couldn't afford them. Right. So what did you expect? Exactly. Did you think if they were going to continue paying when they don't have the money to pay or the history to pay? So right now, you're going to see a bubble bursting in the auto finance business,
right.
Similar to what happened in the housing business.
Exactly. In fact, there was another report that came down that the Obama administration is thinking of, again, easing those credit restrictions again.
Well, yeah, they're already doing it. They are trying to they're suing a lot of banks, you know, for the disparate impact where, you know, they do some analysis that they come up with that says that you're not giving enough loans to minorities, therefore you must be racist. And that's what's happening. And, you know,
it's the standard with that guy.
What people don't know about the housing crisis is that if you look up on the internet, do a search and come up with the 1992 Boston Federal Reserve underwriting guidelines, you'll see the seeds of the housing crisis. The Boston Federal Reserve had been picketed and lobbied by Acorn and other groups. And you read those guidelines and it says throw out credit standards, throw out job history, throw out payment history, income, everything else. So the government took those guidelines and they put them into effect in the Clinton administration. And Janet Reno sued banks that didn't follow those guidelines.
Remember, yes.
So if you give up underwriting guidelines and you're always looking at a potential loan applicant, stability, ability, and intent. And you look at credit reports. But the Boston Federal Reserve said you can't look at credit reports on some people. You have to throw those out as well. So, you know, that's what started the housing crisis, is the Boston Federal Reserve, the Clinton administration, Janet Reno, Bob Rubin, who took it to Wall Street and said, have I got a deal for you? Now, here's what Washington didn't know. They didn't know about securitizations. Why should they? Most of them have never run a business in their life. They don't know anything about what we go through as real people every day, doing our jobs, trying to make it by. So they said, this is smoke and mirrors. We'll sue a few banks. We'll force them to write some bad loans, but it won't be too bad because there won't be that many. Well, securitization was the way for banks who didn't want to take that risk. The banks were saying, these loans are going to be bad. I need to get them off my books. Well, Wall Street came along and said, hey, Mr. Banker, we can securitize those loans. Get them off your books. You never have to worry about them. And you can write as many as the government wants you to write without any risk. That's what they did. And then, of course, in 2007, once everything was already, everyone knew in the business that the housing crisis was coming. They knew in 2006, and I'll tell you how. When you're analyzing a portfolio, you use what's called static pool analysis. I had a friend call me from Colorado in May and said, Vince, how are your statics on the car loan portfolio? And I said, you know what? Craig, I said, the portfolio, it had a little bit of a blip. I said, I don't know exactly what it is, but something's going on. We decided to tighten up our underwriting guidelines at that point. In October, he called me again. And he said, Vince, he said, something big is happening. Housing loans are going bad in record numbers. No one's going to report it. Well, Fannie and Freddie came in 2007 when everyone knew that the housing crisis was coming. And they tried to do what's very common with people who don't know what they're doing. They tried to outrun the crisis. They thought if they bought a whole bunch of more loans, that they could actually outrun it and it wouldn't get them into trouble because somehow those loans would be good. So they put in, what, a couple of $1 trillion?
Is that what they call a Ponzi scheme?
Essentially it is, but it's not because they're being dishonest. It's because they're being what they typically are, which is stupid bureaucrats who were trying to CYA and didn't want to face up to the problem and thought, let's hide it or outrun it, and maybe no one will notice. Maybe it'll get better. And that's common, and of course it didn't happen, and we had the housing crisis. So then, of course, the government, knowing that they had been the spark and Wall Street the gasoline, you know, they decided to cover it all up with Dodd-Frank.
Sure.
And Dodd-Frank was nothing more than an attempt to cover up, you know, the crisis that Washington.
I was going to say, what do you know about Dodd-Frank?
The same thing everyone knows, next to nothing.
Right.
We do know that no one has read it, but
Sure.
states' attorney generals are now reading it, and they're starting to sue loan companies over this bill because it gives them the right to do that, and they figure they can extort money out of banks who won't fight the lawsuits. They'll just give in and pay them off, which is what states do. I mean, look what they've done in New York, you know, with all of those lawsuits. So most people, rather than fight the lawsuit, would rather pay it. So that's the game. So that's what, you know, Dodd-Frank has put a big damper on business and on banking. I mean, what they've done is they've said, well, it's, you know, banks are too big to fail. Well, if you think about it, what's happening to all your small community banks? They're all going to
Right, exactly.
They're
Yeah.
disappearing.
You and I grew up, yeah. You could go down to Northborough Bank or Pembroke Bank or whatever.
Yeah, so what's happened is you've created too big to fail. And those banks, because they are big, they can afford the lawyers and the internal people to comply with all the ridiculous things that the government wants them to do. But the small banks can't. So you get too big to fail on one side and too small to succeed on the other.
Yes.
So we're throwing out of business a lot of small banks, or they're being gobbled up by the big business, big banks. And we're creating the welfare state, which, when they achieve that, which is what I think the Obama administration is on their way to try to do, then you've got European socialism, which is big banks, big business, big unions, and big government controlling everyone's lives.
And no jobs.
No jobs, and worse, no hope.
The other thing too, I spoke to him, Tom Wesley's been on my show. He's been to Europe several times, not only when he was in the Navy, but he traveled to Europe extensively. And he told me on my show that there's what he calls transgenerational unemployment. The grandfather's unemployed, the father's unemployed, the son's unemployed. And again, not necessarily because they're on the dole and they're lazy, although once you get transgenerational, it becomes a way of life, but because there's absolutely nothing to these people.
One of my son-in-law's fathers, he lives in, he's from Ireland, my son-in-law is. His father at 54 was told by the union that he had to retire because a younger person needed his job.
Right.
And they didn't tell him until after he had actually agreed to do it, because you have to do it, you don't have any choice, that he couldn't get his pension for 3 years. So that's the way it is. There are no jobs in Europe, as there are so few jobs here in America right now. But that's the sacrifice that they expect us to make for creating a welfare state, and that's not a fair trade, in my opinion. You know, one of the things I admire about Winston Churchill is that, you know, before World War II, the people in Britain thought he was, you know, sort of a dodgy guy who was, he's got crazy ideas, whatever. But when the war came, they needed him. And he got them through the war, and after the war, they threw him out again.
He lost to the socialists, that's right.
Exactly. And he kept on telling them that socialism doesn't work, it's the worst form of government. That it's a terrible system that takes away people's self-respect.
Sure.
And that was his greatest fight, he thought, and he lost it. And that was tough. I mean, and I hate to see us go the same way, because people don't understand, you know, just what you give up to have the blanket of socialism covering you up.
Exactly, everything. You have safety and security, but you don't have any freedom. And freedom isn't a very safe and secure way to be, but I would definitely choose freedom over safety and security, because it puts me in the driver's seat, it puts you in the driver's seat of your own lives. Moving on, let's talk about a little bit about socialism. Let's look at everything that's going on right now, not only what we just talked about the housing crisis and the banking crisis, and what Rahm Emanuel says, you don't want to let a crisis go to waste. They actually used that as a springboard to introduce their socialist policies. Let's look at the second one. Let's look at Obamacare. That's another thing, too. I mean, we saw in the 90s under Clinton with the change in the HIPAA laws, and when Hillary tried to introduce Hillary Care, of course it was soundly defeated, but their compromise were the HIPAA laws. And I spoke to a man years ago on my show, Stephen Tucker out in Illinois, and he runs a insurance brokerage firm. This man, he and I spoke at length about Obamacare and what it meant. Everything that he had spoken about in 2009 and 2010 on my show, we are seeing today. Never mind the failed launching of the website. That's an asterisk. That's an aside. Everything that we're seeing now, I don't know if you've heard from some of the people that you've met on the campaign trail. My situation is I'm unemployed. I have to take the state-run health care. It is not like when you and I were kids. We could go see the local doctor. We could see them anytime. If we couldn't pay, we'd work out a payment plan. Everything is so regulated. I can't see my doctor for 3 months. And the last time I saw her was about 2 months ago. And it wasn't like when I was younger. You would think that as I get older, that doctor would say, all right, you're 50, we need to take a little more time, we need to look at a few more things. No, it was slapdash and, okay, how you feeling? I'm okay. Well, what questions do you have? Well, it's like, well, it looks like you're okay. We took your blood, you're okay. Call me in 3 months. It's like, well, wait a minute. I mean, the creeping EVs here going on, and you haven't looked at me. And this is what we're at right now. It's like a mass production, and this is part of socialism, isn't it? Just feed them through the grinder.
Well, I had a checkup about a year ago with my doctor, and something had changed, and I pointed it out to him. I said, doctor, you got a computer, an iPad, in front of him, as he was talking to me, and he was entering information into the iPad.
Yes, mine too.
And he said, I'm really sorry. He said, this is now a requirement. He said, I have to do it. He said, I can't even look at you. He said, normally, he said, when I look at a patient, I look for cues about, how your eyes look and how you're...
Sure.
He said, now I have to look at this computer.
Right.
And I said, what do you think of that? He said, I don't like it. He said, it takes away from why I became a doctor. I didn't become a doctor to look into a computer and make notes so the government could look at those notes. And that's what's happening to healthcare, where, I tell people, when I was in the Army, I remember in basic training, the sergeant telling us, you may forget your girlfriend's name, you might forget a lot of things in your life, you'll forget everything. You'll never forget your Army number, your serial number.
Sure.
We would look at each other and laugh and say, hey, when I'm out of the Army, I'll never remember it. RA2133816.
It's burned into your head.
Okay? That's what we are in Obamacare. We're that number. We aren't a person anymore. We're a number. And even when you look at Romney Care, the first year Romney Care came into effect, the health care cost of my company went up 28%. The next year, 24%. The next year, 23%. And we had to cut benefits for our employees.
And you probably have to lay some more people off, too.
I'm told that with Obamacare, next year our health care costs could go up an additional 97%. You know what? We could go out of business with all this help from the government trying to give us cheaper health care. It's ridiculous.
We know this. You know this. Businesses know this. There are countless articles, countless interviews from people. I told you I spoke to a guy back in 2009 on my show. He already said this. We all saw this train heading down the track, yet here we are today. What got disconnected between what is reality and this perception that, I don't know, America has, or maybe liberals have, or maybe the powers that be have, and says, oh, don't worry, it's going to be fine. Yeah, push it. I mean, there's been a disconnect there, hasn't there?
It all comes down to, I used to teach classes on how to manage businesses and manage people, because that's really what you're doing. And Douglas McGregor had a great theory. It's called Theory X and Theory Y. Theory X says that people are lazy, shiftless, they don't want to work. If you want them to work, you've got to give them the carrot or the stick.
Right.
Either you give them an incentive, money, something, or you kick them in the butt to get them to work.
Right.
Theory Y is that people are motivated. People want to work. They need work for their self-esteem, not just to take care of their families and make a future for themselves. Management's role isn't to do anything except get out of their way and don't do things to demotivate them.
Yeah.
They come to you motivated already. Have you ever taken a job in your life where you've said, boy, am I going to take this company for a ride?
No.
I'm not going to work. I'm going to be lazy. I'm not going to do anything.
I love contributing. I love having, I see something wrong, it's like, you know what, I got an idea. Can I talk to you about this?
That's right.
Well, we're always looking for that next, always pushing that next. This is what I do here with my show. It's like, I could have just said, the hell with it. I'm not going to be on the radio anymore.
Right.
I created all of this because I've got that, it's like, I want to do something.
So Ronald Reagan looked at people and said, theory Y.
Yeah.
Everyone's motivated. We want to get out of the way of people, and we want them to create and to do things and to work and be successful. And look what happened to the economy.
Sure. I remember
somewhere along the line, Democrats got more people to agree than not that people are lazy and no good and whatever. And I'm sorry to say, I think there are Republicans in Washington who believe that now.
Yeah.
And it's because they're disconnected. They don't run businesses. They don't talk with people every day.
Absolutely true.
You know what? We have employees. I can't think of one of them who doesn't try to do a good job. That doesn't mean they all do a good job, but they try to do a good job.
Yeah.
And maybe there are some things that hold them back. But, you know, I always thought when that whole thing, the number came out about, well, there's 47% of the people who don't want to work. Well, how about this? Why don't we get out of the way of business and let them create jobs and fight? Because if we accept that fact, that Republicans aren't going to do much to help create jobs either, because why should they? Is that their excuse? Have even Republicans now said to themselves, government's big, we like it big, we're in control, we get all the benefits, and therefore, the heck with it, we're not going to do things that get economic freedom. And you know, what's the saying? Without economic freedom, there is no freedom. You know, and this is the thing that sometimes it's hard to get across to people. Because I hear a lot of candidates talk about freedom, but they don't seem to know where it comes from. When companies are strong, when jobs are plentiful, if I don't like the job that you're giving me, or the benefits, or the way you treat me, I can say, see you later, I'm going to go somewhere else.
Right. And it's incumbent that we have an economy, like you said earlier in the interview, there was a time when you didn't like your job, a week or two later, you'd have another one.
Leave it.
Right.
You know, but this government seems to think that they like this crony capitalism deal, where they can pick the winners and losers and decide, you know, who's successful and who isn't. And that includes us. That's not American. That's not what we grew up with. Freedom comes from having the opportunity to work wherever you want, being able to stand on your own 2 feet, support your family, send your kids to college, or do whatever you want. But when you can't get a job, your self-respect goes away, your hope for the future goes away, everything does, and you become more dependent on government because you have to.
Certainly.
And that's the opportunity Rahm Emanuel was talking about.
Yes.
Get people hooked on the government.
That's it. That's absolutely.
And then we got them.
Now, we have more regulations now today than I think ever has existed in the entire history of the United States. Something like 80,000 pages a year. Regulations originally, historically, they were originally invented, clean up the environment. There were violations as far as worker safety was concerned. I'm talking about the Industrial Revolution, the turn of the century. And granted, anybody can open up a history book and we can all come to the conclusion that yes, these were good ideas and this was necessary. Fast forward year 2000, even now, 2014. No one in their right mind would send a 9-year-old child to work 15 hours a day. No one in their right mind would say to a pregnant woman, "You're pregnant, you're fired, move the next person in." But yet we keep piling more and more and more regulations on. And all it really seems to do is not actually protect people or even benefit businesses. It just seems to keep the ones who have the money to afford the regulations in business. We've just spoken about that. And it just chips off and knocks off all these small companies. You go anywhere through America. You could drive through Worcester. They're boarded up buildings, boarded up businesses, boarded up houses. Never mind going out down south or out Midwest or even far west. Just drive around Worcester. It's always these small companies. I can't afford any more regular. I can't afford this. Go ahead.
Right, I mean, that is true. I mean, what you hear from small business people more now than I really care to hear about is when I got enough money in the bank and have my 401k filled and my kids' colleges paid for, I'm out of here. Because they don't want to deal with all the inspectors. And listen, I have to tell you, I have people, regulators and people looking over my shoulder and making demands for silly stuff. I mean, things that...
It gets ridiculous. Airbrained almost.
What happens is you have a bureaucrat sitting at their desk saying, "Okay, I got nothing to do today. Let's look at Vince's business and let's see if I can come up with..."
Ruin today. You know what? It's Tuesday. Let's ruin someone's day.
Right. Well, what do I need? What do I think I want to know about his business that I have no right to know? Or what do I want to regulate? Or whatever? I mean, here they are. The president now saying that it's just terrible that America doesn't have, a family leave act. Well, if you have and the minimum wage, when you look at that, right?
Yeah.
Back in the 90s and the 80s, you'd drive by fast food restaurants, and there'd be signs in the window saying, "Help wanted, starting pay $13 an hour.
And we'll give you $100 sign-on bonus." I know exactly what you're talking about. I remember that.
So now we need a law that says raise the minimum wage when fast food restaurants were paying $13 an hour years ago.
I did. I flipped hamburgers for Burger King back in the 90s. Yeah.
I ran 51 fast food restaurants I had that I oversaw. And it was tough to get employees. It forces you to give them pay, give them benefits, give them pay, give them benefits, do whatever to keep. Needed to be a family leave, needed to be a part of it, you would do that too.
Sure.
So we don't...
You would do it yourself. If an employee came to you, said, "Mr. Cogliano, my father just died last week. I need, I mean, you'd be like, "Go,
right.
just go. Come back. We'll put you on the schedule when you're ready to come home."
So the economy is bad now, and wages at fast food restaurants and other places have gone down.
Sure.
Because there are lots of employees looking for jobs, and you don't have to pay as much.
That's right.
So that's what happens. So government creates a problem by ruining the economy. They don't take responsibility for it. They write laws pretending they had nothing to do with it, that hurt business, and then they say, well, now we have to raise wages because people aren't getting paid. And what I really love, too, about this president and this administration is that they claim to be the little guy, right, for Main Street?
Always.
Oh, yeah, that's whose side they're on. But they give $75 billion a month to Wall Street to prop up an economy and those companies and the 1%. Their income has risen 5 to 7% in the last 6 years. Middle class income like ours has gone down.
Like low middle class is flat.
That's right.
Dropping.
That's right. So they're taking care of the rich guys. So what I say is, and by the way, they're giving us extended unemployment, more welfare, and more food stamps because we should be happy too. Okay? That's not what we want. We want jobs.
Exactly.
And they don't give them to us. So it's so disingenuous. They're taking care of Wall Street, pretending to take care of us. And the American people look at it and they go, oh, okay. And they don't put that all together. that these people are hurting us so they can take care of their rich friends on
I spoke to a guy who's running for Senate out in Texas, Colonel Reed Reason, and he said that those were his exact words. They are hurting us. It is purposeful. And my question to you is, but we hear about how Obama was schooled in Alinsky, Ayers, he studied all of that communism stuff, and everybody in his administration is of that same ilk. And okay, that's one side of the argument, but you just said they're all taking care of their big business buddies, and they're handing out money left and right. How do those two things somehow meet in the middle? Isn't the Alinskyism and the communism supposed to be anti-business?
No. Excuse me, these guys aren't, I'm not so sure they're communists, but they want to. So they'll take, they'll take crony capitalism, like I said, the big banks, big unions, big government, big business all working in concert, and we're the ones who suffer because we can never get ahead. That's what Europe has. I mean, Europe, it's very unusual for people to have, quote, the American dream. So here is this government now telling us they're for the American dream when they're really not. What they want to do is control every aspect of our lives because they are theory X people who believe we are lazy, and stupid, and we can't look out for ourselves, and we're racist and mean, and we're cruel, and we would, step on ants or do whatever. They need to tell us what to say, how to address, how to think, what to do, and then everyone will be happy because the elites will be in control. Bill believes he's an elite. If you watched him on the Megyn Kelly show, he's not a radical, he's an elite. Obama is an elite. And so are all these And so are all these other people, Bill Gates with Common Core, trying to create a group of employees who are good employees and don't make waves and all of that sort of thing. That's such a big part of Common Core. Again, control our behavior.
I wanted to ask you about some Common Core stuff.
That's not who Americans are.
Right.
We've always been free. We do what we want. We want jobs. We want our freedom. And more, I think people are realizing that the trade-off isn't working. We want our freedom back.
Well, what's happening now is, and we can talk a little bit more about Common Core in a minute, but you touched on a very important point, is Americans are realizing this. We see the rise of the Tea Party, the Liberty Movement. I just gave you the story about Pratt and just the stuff he does here. But what we're seeing now is we're seeing an increase in totalitarianism where our police are more militarized. Every federal agency is militarized. Why does the USDA need an entire SWAT team?
The Department of Agriculture has ordered guns.
Right.
My Department of Ag, are they going to shoot tomatoes?
Exactly.
Well, what's that all about?
They're going to go after organic farmers, and we can some of the stuff that I know about that. My point is, are they seeing that, wait a minute, the American people aren't buying this socialism thing. So there's going to be some more protests. We need to get more weapons on the street. I don't mean for us, but more police on the street. Let's militarize the federal government so that we can keep more control. Are they trying for a power grab here because they see that we're not buying that?
Well, they might be, but it isn't going to work because I've had a gun since I was 10.
Yeah.
And we have more guns than they do. So that simply isn't going to happen.
What is all this gun crap? We use mass school shootings. Do you think that the mass school shootings is a means to an end to confiscate the guns? And why is the liberal left so obsessed with confiscating everyone's guns?
Yeah, again, I just think it's the matter that they want a society that mirrors what they think is good, and I just think they like control. They don't think that we're capable of doing it.
It's a psychological condition, though, isn't it?
No, it is. I mean, look, I tell people, there were, growing up in a small farming community in Pembroke, there were about a dozen of us kids who used to hang out, and we all had guns. And we'd walk around or ride our bikes with our guns. And no one, the chief of police knew us, everybody knew us.
You guys stay out of trouble.
They knew that we knew how to handle it, we were safe, we never had a problem or anything.
Yeah, you were out hunting squirrels or raccoons or something.
Exactly. Right? If you did that today, the SWAT team would have descended upon us and we would have all been put in jail. I mean, again, it really comes down to that. I think it's control. I mean, I really do. I mean, it's hard for me to explain the liberal mind because I don't know how it works. Because I can't think like that. But here's what I do know. Okay, I hear too many people today saying, "Well, they're in control. We can't do anything about it," and gee, it's it's really tough, and we're outnumbered. And no, we're not. I went in the Army in February of '66.
Right.
I went through basic and all that. I was not sent to Vietnam. I was sent to Korea. And I remember, I thought that once I got to Korea, I was told that I was going to go to Vietnam and be a sergeant, head of squad or whatever, but it never happened. So I decided to take a train from coast to coast because the jump-off point was Seattle Tacoma Airport. So I took the train. I wanted to see the country and the Rocky Mountains and all that. You had to go in uniform to get, have the government pay for it. You had to be in uniform. On the way over, people were buying me drinks, talking to me, friendly, whatever. When I came back, a porter, as I was getting on the train, said, "Hey soldier, how long have you been out of country?" I said, 18 months and 24 days. He said, "Things have changed."
Yeah.
Now, hippies were around when I left,
Right.
but I thought these long-haired freaks who just want to take drugs and are communists or whatever, no one's going to pay any attention to them.
Right.
They're not going to.
I see where you're going.
It's only 5% of those people.
Yeah.
How could that happen? Well, the guy was right. The porter was right. Not one person on the train even made eye contact with me. We stopped in Chicago, and there were a few military guys that were hanging out on the train. There was this Green Beret lieutenant, and had all kinds of medals and everything. And he said, "I'm getting off the train in Chicago. There's a 20-minute layover. I want to get some snacks and whatever." And the porter said, "Don't you do that. This is Chicago.
Yeah, you'll get
You're not going to be welcome."
You might get beat up, right?
They grabbed his hat, threw it. A bunch of hippies surrounded him. They spit on him. They kicked him. We had to go off the train and get him and bring him back on the train. And that's when we all knew that things had changed. Now that's only 5% of the crazies. They're running the colleges. They're running a lot of the government.
Today, yeah.
Yeah, today. But we outnumber them by a huge margin. And you're telling me we can't take control again? It's a matter of will.
It is, yeah.
It's a matter of people saying, okay, because you know what Americans always say, well, it's not affecting me and it's no big deal. I can get by. I don't need to get involved. Right? And that's what they do. But the Tea Party and other movements that are out there now, people are realizing that government, if you want it run right, what was the old thing? You don't always get the government you want. You do get the government you deserve. So this is what we deserve? I don't think so. We need to take it back, and we can do it. I mean, it's not, I don't even think it's a difficult thing if people would just stand up and say, I'm going to vote, I'm going to vet the candidates, I'm going to listen to what they say,
Sure.
I'm going to find out if they're believable, and if they are, I'll support them. But if they're not, they get to Washington, and they don't do what I want them to do, we're going to find someone who will do it.
Sure, even if that person only has one term. In fact, even let's look at somebody like Colonel Allen West. He was a great Tea Party candidate.
Yeah.
He was a great Tea Party candidate, but he ended up not going back in. Again, one of the things I love about my show is I always meet people. I interviewed somebody who did a story on the money that goes around in Washington. Like once you're done raising your money for your campaign and doing your campaign and you get into Washington, it's like you're still on that money-raising treadmill. And one of Allen West's job was he was the guy that knocked on everybody's door in Congress and the Senate and said, "Where's your check this week?" Basically for the RNC. And once this was exposed, everybody realized, well, maybe he's not the Tea Party candidate we all thought he was. The left jumped on that. It's like, oh, there you go. Oh, you thought that he was the big Tea Party candidate. What they failed to realize is what you just said. It's like, we thought he was, then we found this out. And we're holding him accountable. You're going to lose next year because you didn't stand up to your principles. This brings me to my point about the constitutional oath, that when you take that oath, everybody it just seems like a ceremony today. I watched the city council in Worcester a little while ago. vote on NDAA. They all got up and said, oh, this is not a local issue, this is something that the federal government has to cover, and they're already decided that this is going to be the law, and we don't need to vote on this. And there were like 20 or 30 people in the audience, some of them from some local groups who were fighting NDAA. They got up and they spoke, they talked about town after town surrounding Worcester, whose own town committees had said, no, we're voting this down. We don't want the federal government in here. We're not going to have them telling our police to arrest Joe or Sue or Bob because they're protesting. That's their right. Leave them alone. Even if they are suspected of something, it's up to our local police and detectives to investigate that. You're not going to come in, grab these people off the street, and indefinitely detain them. Worcester Council said, no, that's a federal problem. We're going to uphold it. That was the point of my video expose when I filmed that was, you just violated your oath. Well, no, it's a federal issue. No, you've got to understand. You read Cleon Skousen's 5,000-year lead. Government is a triangle. You're at the bottom part of that triangle. You hold the most power. You represent the town, the city, us, and we represent us. It's a reciprocal thing. We hold that power. It is your job. Do you see the government today just giving that oath, and representatives just giving the oath like it's a sermon, like they don't quite get it, they don't quite understand it?
I was a selectman for 6 years in Pembroke, and I loved being a selectman. Had a great time. It was to me, it's a good form of government because when you're out at the supermarket or anywhere, people see you, they know who you are. If there are problems, they let you know and they make you aware of that. I think what's happened over the years, and I've seen it even since I'm not a selectman anymore, is that some of the new selectmen, they'll do anything to try not to make a decision or to have this decision fall to somebody else. Because if you make a decision, someone's not going to like you. Someone is going to not
that's
go
the
for
pricks,
it.
I'm sorry, right?
But that's, you see, that it used to be that people knew that went with the territory. Your job is to make decisions.
Yeah.
And there's no more important place to make them than at the local level. You don't let the state, you don't let the feds, you don't let anyone come in, or even any regional organizations that come in to try to take over your authority. Because when you give up power and you give it to them, it'll never come back.
Exactly. In fact, Connie Lucer had said during that, and it struck me, she said, well, if I see further on down the road that, this is becoming a problem and people's constitutional rights are being violated, I'll reconsider my vote next time it comes up. And I'm looking at the council, I'm looking at people, it's like, but it's never going to come back. Once you let this in, that is it.
Right.
Now we've got NSA, we've got drones everywhere. We talked about the militarization of our federal agencies. It's already
Cameras in public squares.
everywhere.
Cameras
it's never
to
gonna
check
go
to
away.
see if you're stopping at the stop sign.
Exactly.
I mean, you gotta be kidding me. We as Americans allow that? What, it's for our own safety, our own good. Government never does anything for our good. They do it for their good. And this is what people don't seem to understand, and that's why they sit on the sidelines, and until they get the ticket from the machine, from the camera that there's no person connected to, then they say, wow, I realized what freedom I was giving up. That's what people have to realize and they have to understand. Government is never benevolent.
No.
Never happens. The role of people who go to Washington, in my case, should be to create more freedom at every opportunity, not take it away. But people in Washington don't want to make decisions because if they do, someone won't like them. And the consultants will tell them, Vince, don't make a decision because if you do, that's a bad thing. Let that agency make it or create an agency to do it, which they've done over and over, so they don't have to take any responsibility. Well, that agency is making that decision now. I'll look into it for you. But they don't. That's right. It's their job. So when you hear the Congress,
someone needs to delegate authority to an agency, but that agency Like, let's look at the EPA. They just go ahead and legislate.
Exactly.
Whereas the Congress should be saying, well, if you want to legislate, that's fine, but you've got to come to a committee meeting and you've got to talk to us first.
What did Madison say? Madison said that the checks and balances, because I don't blame the president for trying to take all the authority he can take. Every president, if they're a good president, tries to do that. I don't blame the Congress for doing that either, because they believe in their primacy, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when one branch gives up that role, and Congress has,
Yes.
it creates a vacuum. The Congress seems to want the court to decide who's in power and who has the authority. Madison said, Congress has the power of the purse.
Yes.
At any time, they can cut the president off at his or her knees by cutting off the power of the purse. But this Congress, because the press says, oh, government shutdown, oh, everything is terrible, they give up the power of the purse. That's their only power. One of their only powers, but it's the most powerful one. And they've given it away. They don't want to do it. So now you finally have Speaker Boehner suing the president over all those executive orders. Sue him. Don't fund anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Shut off the funding.
Right.
And stand up to the press and tell people. And you know what? So much of this is the problem with Republicans in general. Republicans stand up there and say, I want personal responsibility, lower taxes, and whatever. And that's it. They don't explain it. They don't say what that'll do for people. They don't say why that's important or anything else. And you know what?
They give it up themselves.
That's right. So, unless you're willing, we have people on the Republican side who are inarticulate. If you're elected as a Democrat or running as a Democrat, for instance, in Massachusetts, you know exactly what that Democrat stands for. You don't have to go to their website. You don't have to listen to them. You don't have to do anything. If you're a Democrat or a progressive or a socialist, you'll give them money because you know exactly where they stand. With a Republican in Massachusetts, it's a moving target.
It is.
You never know where they stand. And all they do is they try to do sound bites, real quick hits, because they don't want to explain any of their positions. Because they don't feel adequate maybe in explaining them. They don't feel it's necessary to explain them. I don't know.
Make a decision.
So many things. But you have to know why you're for or against something. And too often we're against things and we don't know what we're for. I always, it's the old saying, and you've heard it a million times. In Massachusetts, if you're running as a Democrat, you know where you are and where you stand. If you're running as a Democrat light, which many Republicans do, you think that because you're a physically conservative Democrat, that you can beat the Democrat. And given a choice between Democrat light and a Democrat, Democrats will always choose the Democrats. It's the old thing where I see, remember the old cartoon with Lucy holding the football for Charlie Brown?
Oh, yeah.
And she kept on moving it? That's what the Democrats do to us. We move left. And the Democrats move the football further left.
Right.
And we follow it, instead of saying, no, that doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. My theory is, because ever since I started working on campaigns and interviewing candidates, 6, 7 years now I've been doing this, I've developed the theory that, again, I've watched this. Let's look at the Gomez, Republican light or Democrat light. That's a great term. And I said as soon as he got it, I said he's going to lose. And everyone's like, well, that's a bad attitude to have. And I said, no, you don't understand. He's trying to placate. He's trying to move into that middle path. And give them the choice between a rhino or a Democrat, they're going to always choose a Democrat here in Massachusetts. He's far off going to the far right and standing up for his principles and articulating his platform and telling it like it is and losing on principle. Rather than trying to make himself look good to everybody, and then just ended up with egg on his face.
Well, I hear people now in the race that I'm in, and there are 4 candidates in the primary, and I hear people say, well, Gabriel Gomez beat Markey in this district. He got more votes. And they're right. He did get more votes. What they don't look at is the turnout. Nobody turned out. What they also don't look at is On the South Shore of Massachusetts, I can't tell you why, Democrats don't like Ed Markey. Democrats don't. So the Democrats didn't turn out for Markey. The Republicans didn't turn out for Gomez. But he did get more votes than Markey, in that district.
Sure.
So they think, therefore, we should have a very liberal Republican running for this seat, because that's the way they voted the last time in the South Shore, discounting turnout altogether. Gabriel Gomez should have beaten Ed Markey in the general election. He must know it. Certainly, people in the Republican Party must know it, but they don't acknowledge it. Gabriel Gomez listened to advice. I'm not so sure Gabriel was as Democrat-like. Gabriel's a good guy. I like Gabriel Gomez a lot. I think he was given advice. If he had been Gabriel Gomez, the Navy SEAL, he didn't have to be a total conservative, but if he had been articulate and had been able to articulate his positions and gotten a little angry now and then, I think he would have beaten Ed Markey, because he had a resume that was unbelievable.
Markey is a career politician. There's that joke. Has anybody seen Ed Markey? No, never seen him.
That's right. So I don't blame Gabriel Gomez for what happened as much as I blame whoever was giving him advice. I think it confused him. He was a first-time candidate. He didn't have his feet on the ground. He didn't know who he was. If he had approached this as a Navy SEAL, I think he could have beaten him.
Because kick butt and take names.
That's right. Ed Markey he's not popular with Democrats.
It's amazing, but yet there is. Same thing with Liz Warren. It's like, how did that happen?
Class warfare.
Scott Brown?
Class warfare. I mean, you know what? It's been, since the 60s that we've heard about class warfare, that the system is rigged against you. You can't make it. There is no American dream.
Right.
The big guys who control the money, they're standing in your way of being successful. We need to take away from them and give to you. And Liz Warren brought that to an art form.
Right.
And people, you can get them angry if you look at issues like that.
Even despite the fact that she had $1 million house and that $300,000 a year with Harvard.
Maybe we didn't do a good enough job in getting that information out. Democrats don't seem to mind hypocrisy.
No.
And that bothers me, because what that says is, my ideology trumps right and wrong, good and evil, and what's good for the American people. I was talking to two Democrats about their state rep, and I was telling them that their state rep and the Democrats don't care about people at all. And they were flabbergasted. They said, "Oh, Vince, you're wrong. He cares." And I said, "No, he doesn't." I said, if he cared, he'd be doing things to help people get back to work and regain their self-respect. People are happiest when they're productive, can stand on their own 2 feet and take care of themselves. And this state rep is doing nothing to help people do that, and he could. And if everyone did that, jobs would come back to America, and people would be happy and confident and spend money and do things that would help them feel good. And they looked at me very seriously and said, "But Vince, we give them welfare." I swear to God, that's what they said. So that's what they think. They think they don't know. These people who live in these homes in Cambridge or Brookline or whatever, they don't know what self-respect is. They don't have to. When all these illegals pour over the borders and go into yours and my town, they don't have to worry about it, because they won't be coming to their town.
Right.
Okay?
Exactly.
So it's always easy for them to make these big life-changing decisions for us, because they don't have to live by the same rules. And average Democrats, I talk to a lot of Democrats, because I'm out a lot now, and I think some of them are starting to realize that they've been had. They've been lied to. They've been used by people who don't care about them. They only care about power. Because, see it now, because it's like you ask people, they say, you hear so many people. In fact, I was out getting signatures at the Hanover Mall for the gas tax repeal.
Good, thank you. I did that too.
I had some people, this couple.
I had people say to me, "Oh no, I like high taxes." I make my living off of taxes. I work for the state. It's like, thank you. Have a nice day. Anyway,
I had one couple, this woman, I said, she said, oh no, the government needs that money. And I said, really? And she said, it has to be automatic every year to take care of the infrastructure. And I said, really? I said, tell me, I said, do you get an automatic raise every year at your job?
To take care of your infrastructure?
Right. And she looked at me and she just turned around and walked away, and she couldn't take that. You know, because, you know, they don't think, you know, it must be wonderful to believe in an ideology that relieves you from having to think about the issues, because you just know. You don't have to realistically look at things and say, will this work or will it won't? If it feels good, just do it. And to me, it's a bad ideology, and we as Republicans don't seize on it enough. We talk like numbers crunchers or whatever. This is about people. Those millions of people who have given up ever working again are real human beings, and we don't care about them. And the Democrats sure don't care about them. They will sacrifice those people and their futures for their ideology. That's not what we as human beings should be doing.
As a Republican yourself, what do you hear from the GOP as far as helping you on your campaign, or is there somebody? And who's the seated incumbent in your area right now?
Bill Keating.
Okay, Bill Keating, a Democrat, obviously.
Yeah.
And obviously, we know that the Democrat machine is backing him up. But what do you hear from the GOP machine? Do they have a favorite son or daughter, or what do you hear from?
Oh no, they do. I mean. They have chosen the candidate, not the Mass State Committee, but Mitt Romney has chosen the candidate for this district, you know, that I'm running in, and he's decided, without talking to any of the other candidates, that this one particular candidate should, you know, be the one to get the seat, and that's something that I've been involved. Selectmen, I've been involved. I was the chairman of the Plymouth County GOP for 7 years. And one of the things I resented hugely was people in the party or at the periphery of the party deciding who should run and who we should support.
Instead of letting you guys just battle against yourself and see who comes out ahead.
And not only that, but, you know, the Republican Party in Massachusetts is making progress in a lot of ways. I have to say that. The new computer systems and the pinpoint system of how to get the vote out, which has been tested in 12 races now and has won 10 of them, is spot on. It's terrific. There are a couple of pieces that, as chairman of the Plymouth County GOP, I've been working with Richard Peeler, who's the chairman of the Norfolk GOP, and we think we have a system that can help get more Republicans elected to the State House. And that is that the county organizations like Plymouth County, we're the most successful organization probably in the state. We have more Republicans elected in Plymouth County than anywhere else. And it starts with not the organization or the, you know, the GOP. It starts with good candidates. If you have bad candidates, you can't win, no matter how much money you pour into it in this state. So what we look at is that it's our role as Plymouth County GOP to look and help get selectmen, school committee, people like that elected, because they're on TV in the local community, they're on the media, the newspaper, you know, pays attention to them. And when they get enough, then Mass GOP should step in with this new computer system and help this person who's already pretty well known in their community get elected. So there what you're doing then is you're working with the grassroots. And one of the things that we noticed was, in running companies, I always look at, you know, people say, well, you got to pay people more money or do this, whatever, to get them to work. No, people work mostly for recognition. Money is a form of recognition. A raise says, you're doing a good job, okay? In the Massachusetts Republican Party, I was a town committee chair. People would come in who were candidates and they would say, Vince, you're a town committee chair, what are you going to do for me? You got sign locations, you got this, you got that, because, you know, I'm a candidate, so you need to help me. And I would look at them and say, I don't have to do anything. You know, you need to prove to me that you're a good candidate before I do anything.
You need to be viable.
Because I'm not going to waste my time supporting a candidate who I know can't win. And a lot of people didn't like that, but that's a fact. So what we started in Plymouth County is a recognition breakfast. We would give out awards to individuals from each town committee in our district, in our county, and it was unbelievable. It was the most well-attended event that we had.
Right.
Unbelievable.
This is why I'm trying to do my August 30th thing. It's not a debate. It's not trying to say that, oh, this candidate's better than any other candidate. One of the things that I do here on my show is I've always tried to interview the underdog, try to get as many people as I can on. I'm almost always, in the 6 years I've been doing this, I'm ignored by the Democrats, except for the LaRouche people, and people yell at me. It's like, why do you have the LaRouche people on? Because they answer my phone call. It's that simple. And people like you answer my phone call, you answer my emails, and the people that are going to attend here on August 30th, they've answered the email. These are the people that need to get the coverage because they're the why personalities. They're the ones that are pushing, always trying to, I want to get my name out there. I want to attend this symposium that's coming up. I want to sit with other candidates. I want to see going out on the internet. This is going out on exposure. I want to get that exposure. I want to try and push my name out there. The other people, like you said, what are you going to do for me? I've sent 4 or 5 e-bombs since May. I hit them all up on their Facebook sites, 0. Absolutely 0. But people like you come onto the show, and I've been doing this for 6 years. I'm looking at 110 candidates since 2008 I've interviewed all across the country. And it's always been the guy on the outside to get himself on the ballot. None of these guys that, like you said, are just sitting pretty.
We said that Richard Pila with the Norfolk group, he started doing the Spirit Awards, their recognition thing.
Mm-hmm.
They used to get 20 people to their meetings. The first Spirit Awards they got were 175 people.
Wow.
So what we're trying to do, Richard and I, and the Cape Cod Club is on board with it as well, that county group, we're trying to get statewide county organizations built up, have them all give out awards to their local people. The people who get awards then would be eligible for statewide awards at a statewide event sponsored by the Mass GOP. And that's a way to give people recognition, build the grassroots, get more people involved because they know people are paying attention and that they care. Because that's the hardest part about being a town committee chair is, does anybody care? You know, that I'm out here trying to organize Republicans and getting things done. When you say thank you to them, you'd be amazed at how far that goes in helping. And then with the new technology, and people, let me just go back a quick point. One of the reasons why people step up and run for office in Plymouth County is they perceive that they've got this organization that knows something about what they're going through and can help them in some way, and that it's okay to run. And we get pretty good candidates, but we vet our candidates. If there's a guy or a woman who's not very good, we're not going to pay attention to them. You know, because the key is to have good candidates running it. It's like I tell people in this race that I'm running in. If this was a red state, you could take a candidate who does talking points and is not a good speaker and is rather weak, but who raises money because he's the chosen one, and you can get them elected, or have a better chance of getting them elected. But in a blue state where you better be articulate, you better be passionate, you better know the issues, you better be able to get people to believe in you and what you stand for, because you have to convince people in the middle, and even some Democrats to get elected. So you have to have very strong candidates, and you have to support them. If you're not willing to do that, you're going to lose. You're going to lose seats. You're not going to gain seats. It's simple. This is rather simple stuff.
And we keep having the government that we always keep having.
Right. So that's why, regardless of how this race comes out, Richard and I and other people will continue to try to build the grassroots in Massachusetts and recognize the people who do the work. Get selectmen, school committee, etc., planning board elected, get them well known, then use the Mass GOP technology to get them elected. We can take a lot of seats in the State House if we follow that.
Certainly.
But over the years, I have to tell you, I've had more people come to me, you know, who said, Vince, you run the GOP in Plymouth County, right? I'm a candidate, I want to get elected. what are you going to do for me? And you say, well, have you ever run for anything? Well, no. Why do you want to run? Well, I've lived in this community for 25 years and I want to give something back. And the minute they say that, they're no longer a viable candidate as far as I'm concerned. If you can't speak, if you haven't tried to participate over the years, if you haven't learned a little bit about the job and what you're expected to be doing, don't bother me. Go do something else. You know, go run for school committee or planning board or selectmen and get yourself elected. But don't start out running for a seat on Beacon Hill.
Sure, right.
Because I can't be wasting I work 60 hours a week. I do a lot of other things.
Can't waste my time.
I can't waste my time supporting someone who doesn't have a chance, who isn't willing to spend their time learning what being a candidate is all about, or a congressman or a legislator on Beacon Hill. You do that by being a selectman and being other local offices.
It's like any other job, a career. You start off at the bottom rung and you work your way up. You gain experience. So what's next for you? Where are you heading on to this? How are things looking for you as far as the election is concerned? The public out there, how are they responding to you?
Very well. I mean, we've had debates, and I encourage people to go onto my website, coglianoforcongress.com. Look at the debate that we had in Sandwich. We're getting another debate that we had up in Middleborough up online. Also, go to the Ed Lambert Show. Look at the Ed Lambert Show. Look at his podcast. Listen to me. Listen to the other candidates. And I want people to see us all, compare us all, and see what we bring to the table, and whether or not the people believe that I'm electable or not. If they decide no, don't vote for me and don't support me. But if you think that someone like me can represent you in Washington, who has the ability, who knows the issues, who can speak well, who can fight for you, then support me. But I'll take my chances if people look and listen to me and look and listen to the other candidates and listen with intelligence and listen to whether or not we know the issues, or whether we're doing talking points, or whether we're trying to evade the issues, or whether we're just trying to give pat answers and not really answer them at all.
And I didn't see any of that in this interview. This is the style that I did. It's a conversation, because I think that's part of the problem with the way interviews are done today. Everything is that 30-second soundbite, but that's not how my show is, and that's how a lot of the shows that you've been on already. You've discovered that. It's like, no, it's not this 30 seconds. If you went on Channel 7 or Channel 5, you'd have 30 seconds. That'd be about it. They'd probably take something that you say out of context, and it's like, oh, this is your position. Whereas on a show like mine, or the shows that you've been on, you get to have a conversation, and you get to actually answer the question.
That's why I like the debate format. I mean, if you were to, there's like some of the shows that are liberal shows, and the TV ones, they're not looking to find out what you believe, what you stand for, what your life experience is, what your vision is for the congressional district, for the people of Massachusetts, for the United States of America. They're not interested in that.
Right.
They're looking at chipping away at your support. So they'll ask questions that no one really cares about, but if you answer them...
How do you feel about the Hobby Lobby decision?
Whatever, yeah.
Notice how I didn't even cover that, because it's not important.
Right. And so many people don't even understand the decision.
Right.
They don't get it at all. So I had someone ask me in an interview, and it was a good question, really. How are you going to fight the women who believe, without even thinking, that Republicans have a war on? I said, I don't know. I can't deal with people who just don't comprehend the real world.
You're coming back on my show. This is what I've said all the years I've been doing this. Even if you don't know the answer, just say it.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
People have so much more respect for a person like that. You know what? I don't know. I've been looking into it. I'll have to get back to you. You're being honest about it.
But people whose ideology trumps reality, I can't deal with that. I don't know how. I can't spend my time convincing them. I want to convince the people who have given up, or who believe that there's no way to change, I want to convince them that we far outnumber the left.
Sure.
We far outnumber them. All we have to do is have the will. And if we have the will, we can take the country back. I don't want to hear this, that we can't take the country back. I don't even want to hear that we can't take Beacon Hill. We can. With the right plan and the right candidates, we can do it.
Excellent.
Period.
Vince, thank you.
Thank you for
Thank
having
you so
me.
much for being on the show. Have a good day, sir.
Thanks.